Welcome back to FreightWaves Now here on this Wednesday morning. We're coming back with our next live guest this morning. One of our staff writers, Noy Mahoney, is joining us today to talk a little bit about Chameleon Carriers and what they're doing in the industry. So Noy, thank you for joining us. This is a story that we talked about yesterday in our headline segment. One that I think is really interesting because I didn't necessarily know that this happened in the industry. Can you talk to us a little bit about what a Chameleon Carrier is and what they're doing in the industry?
Companies that sort of change their name while using the same trucks and often the same truck drivers, and they're changing their name to get away from past safety violations or reasons, accidents they've caused. So they're trying to just get away from past negative behavior.
The interesting thing is that with this, what is the kind of the legality? Because it seems just like as the FMCSA, who issues the operating authority, they should have a hand on who is owning the operating authority, right? And I feel like it would be logical for them to be like, oh, you're the same owner, you're using the same drivers, we're not going to issue this authority. But it just happens where they just keep popping up again and again, right?
That's correct. What I've learned from my research, talking to people in the industry, is it used to be a lot easier to do this. And, in the past, maybe 10, 15 years, the FMCSA has really tried to crack down on this, as well as, some of the states, like the state of Texas, passed legislation on the state level, giving the Texas Department of Public Safety, authority to sort of look at these things too. So there is, people know this is going on, and they're trying to really crack down. And I think they have done a better job of weeding these carriers out, but it still does happen. They're still out there.
No, when you look at this situation, has this been something that the industry has been plagued with for some time, or has this really started to ramp up as of recently?
Based on my research, this has been going on maybe since as long as trucking has been around. It's always been a part of the trucking industry where people maybe they got one of their trucks got in an accident and they get all these safety violations and they can't afford to pay, the insurance premiums or what have you. And so they just go refile with the FMCSA, get under a new name. And they just keep going on with the same equipment and same drivers while trying to hide, their past negative behavior.
So obviously, shady business practices are one of the things that can just be a danger to the public in general. But other than that, what are some of the biggest risks that they pose if they just keep popping up doing the same thing over and over again?
Well, obviously, they pose a safety risk in terms of accidents on the highways or accidents on the roadways, excuse me. And what happens, I think, is, they can sort of give a black eye to the trucking industry. When these things happen, people say, oh, it's everywhere. It's all these trucking companies are doing, trying to get around the rules and do bad things. And I think by and large, it's most carriers in the industry are trying to do right, trying to do things by the book. And so when these things happen with these kinds of carriers, it gives the whole industry, sort of a black eye.
And Noy, do you have any examples of potential repercussions for these actions happening? I mean, you think about someone that maybe is banned from a social media site. I've seen people that just make a new email account or use a VPN network. For example, what are some of the repercussions that happens from some of these chameleon carriers?
Well, if the FMCSA determines, you're a chameleon carrier, they can put you out of service. This whole story I've been working on started with a case in Houston, Texas, back in May. And what happened was a carrier called J. Logistics got put out of service by the FMCSA for numerous safety violations. And a month later, the FMCSA issued another press release saying we're putting this company called JPL Logistics out of business. And JPL Logistics is the same company as J. the same owner, same truck, same equipment. So this person who tried to, continue operating can no longer run a trucking company. I think he's banned from, operating any trucking company now.
So, Noy, when we talk about those repercussions, like Anthony asked, it's a good thing to talk about. Is there any type of three-strike system or any type of institutionalized, I guess, kind of test for these carriers that pop up? Like, is it like you did it once, okay, we'll let you come back. You did it twice. we're a little more hesitant now, 3 strikes, you're done? Or is it just completely up to the discretion of the FMCSA on how bad your offenses were?
I think it's what you said in that last part. It's a bit discretionary on the part of FMCSA to determine, how bad you are, basically, or what occurred, during when what kind of violations occurred with your trucking company. So it seems a bit discretionary. I think it should be a little more, you do it once and bang, you're gone. I mean, so I think some of the legislation or penalties need to be updated.
And Noy, in the story that you wrote that went up yesterday morning or Monday morning, that was, you talked a little bit about technology and how technology is playing a role in tracking and then cracking down on carriers who are doing this. What type of technology are we talking about, and how is that being utilized to keep track of who is and who isn't operating legitimately?
Well, a lot of the FMCSA and even one of the insurance firms, trucking insurance firms I interviewed, Central Analysis Bureau, they have this software that, whenever a new company, whenever a carrier comes and files for authority with the FMCSA, they have software now that can look at phone numbers, look at addresses, look at even names on the applications, and sort of see if they match, existing carriers or carriers that had previous or names that had previous violations. So as the technology has made it easier to do, become a chameleon carrier, the technology has also improved to catch these guys. So it's sort of a cat and mouse game with these types of carriers.
And Noah, of course, you cover a lot of what's going on in the state of Texas or that border region. Are there any regions in the U.S. that really are more prevalent for chameleon carriers? Or does this seem to just be a nationwide thing?
That's a great question. I think it's really just a nationwide thing. From my research, I saw examples in Alabama and Arizona, Texas. So it's pretty widespread. And I don't think it's specific to any part of the United States. And it's probably pretty widespread around the world with all types of, commercial carriers.
Mm-hmm. Last question for you, Noy. Well, if you're a new driver entering the industry, obviously you don't necessarily have the know-how to get in with a carrier who might have a good or a bad reputation. But do you have any advice for people who are trying to enter the industry to maybe stay away from these companies? Like, is there any red flags that they should look out for, or just kind of make sure that they're doing their due diligence when they're interviewing?
I think based on what I've heard from truck drivers and companies and people in the industry, asking a lot of questions is, like you said, is a good way to start. And red flags would be if a company tells you don't worry about hours of service, or don't worry about taking breaks, or doing this or doing that, or following the logbooks, electronic logbooks. Those are red flags right there when a company tells you not to follow the rules right from the start. And I think, when you'll know if a company is playing by the rules or not right away. There's all types of red flags that'll pop up pretty quickly.
Awesome. No, I think that's great advice there. And thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be sure to follow up with you again in the future on your latest stories. Right now, we're going to head over to Isaiah Buchanan, who has our first section of the Social Roundabout.